try to do this by hand here. Oh yeah, it's already dripping out. Oh, it's our bolts. Oh, shit. And torque it to spec, because that, oh, it's dripping. It's a little bit is coming out. Hey guys, welcome to Spencer's Garage. Today we are going to be working on my wife's 2017 Honda CR-V. We are going to be changing the CVT transmission fluid. So let me show you what I have going on here. I'm going to be changing the transmission fluid and also changing the two filters that are within the transmission. So first over here, just to let you know, this is a good time to be changing the oil. So I will be changing the oil as well while I have the car jacked up. Of course, Honda oil filter, and a crush washer for that. Next up, we have this Honda transmission fluid. This is Honda Genuine. It is HCF-2. This is specifically for the Honda CVT transmission. You only want to use this fluid. Trust me, go Honda Genuine. And by the way, with all these products, especially the oil here, try to get all these links for you in the description, so just take a look there. And I will have the part numbers for things like all these 3 O-rings. I'll have all these part numbers listed in the description as well, so you'll know everything that we're using here. Also, there is a elongated funnel that I have to use because the fuel plug is all the way down there. I'll get a light in there in a little bit later, but just some specialty items that you may not have, I'll have those listed in the description. So let me just run through these parts real quick. As you know, here is the transmission fluid. You'll need about 6 quarts. It may only take about 5.3 or so. We'll see how much this one takes, but I would get at least 6 quarts if you're doing the filters. Now I do have another video on this car, just doing a drain and fill of the transmission fluid, you know, no filter changing. I would suggest doing that about once every 30 to 50,000 miles, depending on your driving habits. That's up for debate. You guys can talk about it in the comments, but I like to change transmission fluid around every 30,000 miles. And then about every second or third transmission fluid change, I would change the filters. You know, some Honda dealers say that the filters are lifetime, but I don't trust that, and I like to do preventative maintenance on my vehicles, so I am going to go ahead and change the filters at 80,000 miles. So anyway, we have the fluids. There are 2 filters. This is one of them. This is on the heat exchanger, and then this is on the back of the heat exchanger. I'll show you all these things. This little O-ring goes on the top of this filter, so you'll need that. I have a crush washer for the drain plug, you'll need that. And then underneath the oil pan, we're actually going to take off the transmission pan. There is this filter right here. You can see there's some media right there. Again, I'll have these part numbers linked in the description. And then while you have the pan off, I would definitely recommend a new gasket as well. Gonna need that. All right, so next, now that we have all the parts out of the way, let's go ahead and jack up the vehicle. You are going to want the vehicle level because, well, you'll see here in just a moment that is how we get the correct fill level in the transmission. So I'm going to go ahead and jack up the front and the rear and try to get it as level as possible. In case you didn't know, you're going to want to put your jack stands, if you're using jack stands, on this pinch weld. There is both one on each side in the front of the vehicle, and then also if you come down here next to the rear wheel and tire, there's one right here too. So those are where your pinch welds are, and that's where you're going to want to put your jack stands. All right, and then to jack up the rear of the vehicle, you're going to want to jack it up by that tow hook right there. All right guys, you can see I have the car jacked up. Now, you don't necessarily have to do that step first. You could undo this air box, which I'm about to do. You could do that first, but I like to get the transmission fluid draining while I'm doing that work. Now, before we start to drain the transmission fluid, I want to show you where the transmission fill plug is. It is directly right down there. You can see that white plug. It even says HCF-2 on it. You're just going to pull that plug out And the reason why you're going to take the plug out is because you don't want the transmission fluid to be chugging out. This is what that plug looks like right there. You just pull it up by this little handle. It's just rubber right there. So if you don't pull that out, then the transmission fluid, whenever you undo the drain bolt, it will, it will chug out, and it will have the, tendency to get everywhere and be very, very messy. So I'm going to go ahead and for sure undo that first. All right, guys, so we are underneath the car, and we need to remove this aluminum cover. So it is held on by 3 Phillips head screws. It looks like I have one missing right here. Third one is all the way back there. There's the third one right there. And then also along here, I believe it is a total of 6 of these screws right here. These just take a flathead. Just gonna put all the screws on top of here and place this to the side. Okay, so we are underneath the vehicle, and we are more so on the driver's side. As you can see, here is your oil pan. This is for your engine oil. I'll be changing that here in a little bit, but for now, this is the CVT transmission oil pan. And if you look right here, this is the drain plug, and then up here, this is called the check bolt. We'll get into that a little bit later. Okay, so here's another view of it. Here is the drain bolt, and up there's the check bolt. So for this drain bolt, I am going to use a 3/8 ratchet. This is kind of a long one. This is going to give me some extra leverage. You may have to use a pry bar, especially if this is your first time doing it. It may be on there a little tight. First, I'm just going to crack it loose. Oh man, yeah, this. There we go. Now I think I can get the rest by hand after you crack it loose. And I had a big ratchet on there, so I'm gonna now move my drain pan closer here. And this is probably gonna spew out pretty far, so just be careful. Probably wanna have some gloves on. There we go. By the way, guys, it's a good idea if your car is warmed up, like maybe just drive it around the block, get it up to operating temperature, because the fluid will flow out just a little bit easier, a little better if the engine is warm. Engine and transmission are warm. So you may want to do this after a little drive. And like I said, be sure to wear some gloves. Now let's take a look at this drain plug and the magnetic end of it right here. Alright guys, so here is the drain plug. Now, this does have a magnetic end on it, so I'm just going to put this on a white paper towel just to give you guys a little glimpse. This is completely normal to have, a little bit of shavings on there. Just, it's not even really shavings, it's just a little gunk on there. That's completely normal. Now, I looked it up in my maintenance log of this car, and I actually changed the transmission fluid at 68,000 miles, so that's not too long ago. But I wanted to create this video to show you guys how to change the filters, so that's why I'm doing this a little premature. But also, by the way, this is my 3rd time draining the transmission fluid. I think I did the other one at around 40,000 miles or so. I can't remember the exact mileage, but this is my 3rd time to change the transmission fluid in this car. And like I said at the beginning, you want to do this about every 3rd drain and fill. And again, if you're not to that point yet, I do have a video. I'll have the link in the description for just a drain and fill, to where you don't have to change the filters. Anyways, so that's that. Also, and take note that there is a crush washer in here on this drain plug. These are a one-time use, so that's why I have that's why I have these. Again, I'll have these part numbers in the description, but these are different than the oil drain plug, different size. So I'm gonna go ahead and open these up and make sure I put a brand new crush washer on this drain plug. And that is still draining the fluid. You can see that. I like to let my fluids drain pretty good. So that's why I am draining the transmission fluid before I do the filter up top here. So you could change this first, as I said, but I like to go ahead and let my fluids fully drain and give it time. while that is fully draining, I can now start this up top here. But if you didn't want to do this with your vehicle jacked up, you can do it in that order as well, whichever way you choose, but this is the way I want to do it. So next, let's get started up top here in the engine bay. We need to remove this air box to get access to 3 bolts down there. That is the transmission cooler. So in order to remove this air box here, we need to first remove this, or loosen this clamp right here on the air intake. So you can use a Phillips screw right here, or I believe this is a 5.5 millimeter. So you want to loosen this up so we can get this clamp off of this intake box. And then we're going to want to disconnect the wiring harness from this sensor. As you saw me just do, it's very, very simple. Just push down on that little button on the harness clip, just push down and pull out. So now that is disconnected. And then next, this airbox is held in by a couple of bolts. They are 10 millimeters. There's one right there. And then one, let's see, one back there, that one right there, down there. So I'm gonna get a 6-inch extension and take those 2 out. They're just 10 millimeters. And then this may give you some resistance whenever you try to remove this, because it is held in by some grommets. It looks like this needs to be, the airbox needs to be pushed this way in order to get undone from that grommet. So just be sure to take note of that. So let me go ahead and undo these 2 fasteners, and then I'll attempt to take this airbox out. Also, this piece of harness right here, if you just pull up this little clip right here, will just come out, and then there's a little one right here. So this little piece of harness that is on the airbox, just pull it up and it will release itself. So we're just gonna set that part of the harness to the side, just right here. Now let's try to move this airbox out. Let's see here. Disconnect it from there. So there's the air tube disconnected. Now I should be able to just kind of push it up. There we go. Okay, just straight up. So now I have the air box out. This does have a sensor in here, and you definitely don't want to get dirt and debris on that sensor. So you need to put this in a clean place. You could just put this in the, the footwell of the car. Just make sure that it doesn't get any dirt or debris. Okay, now that a majority of the transmission fluid is drained out, I'm actually going to put this cap back on. You definitely don't want any debris going in there. So now you can see this fully opens up this area. Here's that grommet that the airbox was on, so just take note of that. Now, let me show you our next area of concern. This right here, this is the transmission warmer or cooler, whichever one you want to call it. I believe it's the warmer. It is held on by 3 12-millimeter bolts. There's 2 up top here, and then one that you can't see. It's on the very bottom, just underneath it down here. You can feel for it with your finger. There's a 3rd one down there. So we are going to undo these 3 12-millimeter bolts, and then we're going to move this out because a filter is behind this and 2 O-rings. So that is the first filter that we're going to be changing for the CVT transmission. Oh man, I'm having to use a 1/4-inch ratchet on this one because this one is a little tight with these hoses here. So this 1/4-inch ratchet is enabling me to get in here with limited clearance. Probably could use a 3/8 ratchet on this bolt, but on that first one, it was not going to happen. It's not with my 3/8 ratchet. All right, so those are, I'm going to try to break these loose. Now for this 3rd one, I'm just going to, like I said, I'm just going to feel for it with my fingers here and then undo that one. All right, guys, I got the bottom bolt out so far. This is what that one looks like. I just want to give you guys a quick tip that whenever you begin to start to take this out, you definitely want a rag underneath it. I have one right down there. You can see it's green, because whenever you take this thing off, a little bit of transmission fluid is going to leak out. So just kind of be prepared for that. You probably want to have a rag under there to catch some of it. And then, once we have this off, we'll clean it up thoroughly. All right, guys, I've noticed as I've been loosening these bolts that more transmission fluid has been leaking out at an accelerated pace. So, see? You can hear that. All right, so now I have all 3 bolts out. There are 2 of the O-rings we are going to be replacing. And the filter lives inside there. So I'm gonna get probably some needle nose pliers, kind of move this part out of the way. There we go. Just kind of popped it loose. Now I can get it with my finger here. Just pull it straight out. All right, look at that. So, and you also want to make sure that this O-ring comes off with it. That's another part we're going to be replacing. So here it is. This is the original filter. This has 80,000 miles on it. So there it is. We're going to want to take some of the old, or new, just some transmission fluid and just put it on this O-ring, just kind of lube it up nice and good. We want this lubricated on here. We're just going to put it on top of the filter. Just sits like that. Very good. And it will go into the transmission like this. It just kind of clicks in. So before we put this in, let's go ahead and change out those other 2 O-rings on the heat exchanger. All right guys, let me show you this. I had to take off my gloves because my hands are getting way too hot. It's 100 degrees in Texas here. But anyways, just go ahead and take a pick, and these O-rings, they just come right out. So we're gonna take both these O-rings out. I've already kind of went over this with a blue shop towel, just kind of wipe this down. I've also wiped down the mating surfaces on the transmission down there. I've cleaned that up. I noticed some transmission fluid did leak out, so I tried to clean that up as best as I could. Here are the 2 brand new. Here's one of the O-rings. While you're doing this job, you really don't want to skimp on, you know, O-rings. These don't cost very much, so it's best just to go ahead and, well, the whole reason why we're doing this is preventative maintenance. So anytime I open up a Honda engine or transmission, I always replace any gasket, any O-ring that I come across, because, well, that's just best practice. This one has some little clips in there to where it will eventually just set in. Just try to get it set in there properly. This is the orientation of what you're going to put the filter in there. Make sure that this O-ring is lubed up pretty well. And we're just going to put it straight in there. We're going to listen for it to click in there. So I'm going to be quiet and let's listen to it. There it is. Snapped right in there. All right, as you can see, I have the O-rings, the brand new O-rings, nice and tight on there. Some more fluid leaked out of there, so I'll have to get a rag and wipe down there again. Man, make sure you are wearing some tough gloves, because I wasn't wearing gloves for a minute and it cut me up in a few spots. So I am wearing these work gloves now. So anyways, I'm going to wipe this off one more time. As I said, make sure that this mating surface is clean and this mating surface is clean, and then we can get our 12mm bolts and torque that down to spec. All right, so we're going to hand tighten these 3 bolts first. So these 3 12mm bolts get torqued down to 20 foot-pounds. All right, with all 3 bolts torqued down to 20 foot-pounds, we are now ready to tackle the second filter. All right guys, so before we take off the transmission pan here, I'm gonna put back in the drain plug. I have a fresh crush washer on here. Remember, I'll have these, a link in the description, just off of Amazon. So just gonna give this a quick wipe, and then we're going to hand tighten this first. And then this drain plug gets torqued down to 36 foot-pounds. All right guys, we are underneath the transmission pan here. And I just wanted to take note, there are 10mm bolts and 3 of them are long. So you can see this arrow here, here, and then right here. those arrows actually point to the bolts that are longer than the other ones. So whenever you put this back in, just take note of that. You do have to kind of bend back this plastic piece right here because it is kind of hiding a couple bolts back there. So a total of 14 bolts holding this pan on. So at this point, I just have 2 more bolts to loosen to take out all the way. And at this point, you definitely want to have your drain pan underneath. You can see it's already dripping right here. So just 2 more bolts to go, and then this should be able to lower all the way down. Then we can see our second filter underneath this pan here. All right, I have all of the bolts undone. I should just be able to rock this a little bit. Oh, there we go. It is loose. Good thing I have that drain pan under there. A lot is coming out. We'll let that drain for a moment. Try to get this pan out of the way. Oh good, the gasket came with it. All right guys, while that filter is dripping into the drain pan a little bit, let's take a look at the actual pan here. So you can see there is the drain plug that I put in. We have our gasket. We can take this out. We are going to be putting on a brand new gasket, of course. You can see the dowel pins right here and here. Those are still on the pan, so that's good. Those are going to help us align this gasket perfectly whenever we put on the new one. So I want to take note of a couple things here. Number 1 is that, and number 2 is that. So these are magnets which help get particles, you know, out of the fluid. Of course, you have your magnetic drain plug there, which you clean every time you drain and do a drain and fill. But whenever you take off this pan, one thing you want to make sure that you do is take out these magnets and clean them thoroughly. So let me get some pliers here. Let's take them out. I have a couple of clean paper towels here, and let's go ahead and see how much is on them after 80,000 miles. Getting a white paper towel so we can see the gunk. Looks exactly like the drain plug did. Just some black little particles on there. Nothing major. That's normal for a transmission to have that on there. So I'm just going to wipe this down real good. Oh, it does have this little bracket here that keeps it in that locked on the pan. So I'm just going to take that off, no big deal. And we'll wipe that down. Okay, put that to the side. So you can see this debris on this paper towel here. It's nothing big. Like that is normal for transmissions. So while you have this pan off, do some preventative maintenance. Go ahead and clean this off. Get all those particles out. You don't want these, you know, on your magnet. You don't want that's, you know, it could recirculate or anything like that. And you just want to provide a new clean surface for any new particles. You could take some brake clean and, you know, brake clean this down. I'm in a closed garage and I want to keep it closed because, like I said, I'm in Texas and it's 100 degrees out right now. So I may do it off camera, but I'm not going to do that inside the garage because that stuff stinks. But anyways, there's that one. Let's go ahead and take this one out. Just give you guys a thorough look. Just gonna bring it out there. Looks about the same as the other one. Get me a fresh paper towel here. These are definitely grimy. So I've actually seen a lot worse online. This one is not that bad. So anyways, that's that. I'm gonna clean this up. I'll probably take this pan outside and brake clean it just real quick. Alright guys, so using the brake cleaner was a very good idea. It got loose a lot more particles than I thought it would. So there we are. There are the nice and clean magnets. I already installed them, and you definitely want to make sure that this surface is clean as well. So I just sprayed all this down with some brake clean, got it nice, looking brand new. So now we can go ahead and go back under the car and actually take care of the filter that is in or underneath the transmission. Okay guys, we are back underneath the car, and this is the filter we are going to be changing. It is held in by two 10mm bolts. One is right here, and then one is right here. So we're going to crack that loose, There we go. And whenever you take out this filter, you want to make sure that the O-ring gasket comes out along with it. So I'll show you that here in just a moment once I get these bolts undone here. You might want to have your drain pan still underneath the transmission, just in case there's any. You can see it dripping a little bit right there, so I'll try to do this by hand here. Oh yeah, it's already dripping out. Oh. Okay, I got both bolts out. Just gonna pull it downwards. Oh, there we go. Yep, more transmission fluid is gonna chug out. Be prepared for that, man. Got a little bit on the floor, but that's okay. And also some is draining out of this filter too. There's that O-ring I was talking about. Make sure that that comes along with it. If you don't see that on there, then you need to look for it up in that hole that the filter was connected to. So I'm gonna let this drain out. And for now, let's go ahead and look at the new filter and compare them. All right, you can see here is the new Honda OEM filter. And of course, this is the original to the car. And a little hard to see here. Let me turn on my flashlight. Let's see if I can get a picture. Well, it's really hard to see, but man, that media in that filter looks really, really grungy. You can see it there. So this is the original that came with the car. Here is the new one. This one, of course, being a Honda as well. Look at that filter media. Nice and clean. There's that O-ring I'm talking about. All right, guys, we are going to just push this up. You can see the little hole right there. You'll be able to see it whenever you take out your filter. We're just going to, let's get a little bit of transmission fluid. I'm just going to lube this O-ring up just a little bit along the side, just to get some old transmission fluid and just kind of lube the edges of that O-ring. Just make it a little bit easier to slide up in there. Okay, so now we're just going to slide it up in there straight as possible. Right there, and then we'll get our bolts. Oh, okay, let's hold that up there. When we get these bolts started, just hand tight. All right, guys, both of these bolts get torqued down to 105 inch-pounds or 8.7 foot-pounds. I'm doing 105 inch-pounds. All right, guys, so next we are going to put on our gasket here on the pan here. So it's kind of like a metal gasket, so we'll just put it on these dowel pins. These will help line it up. All right, guys, now that we have the filter here torqued down to spec, we have our gasket on our oil pan ready to go. Now, the oil pan, as you saw, is already cleaned up. I cleaned that with brake cleaner. But now we need to clean the mating surface of the transmission here. Now, there is no RTV used here. All you're using is just the gasket. So I'm just going to go over it with a shop towel and just kind of clean up the transmission fluid that is on there, just all the way around on the mating surfaces. And then we can set up our pan to get it mounted and torqued down to spec. All right, guys, I have all of these bolts hand tightened down, and now I am torquing them to spec. Again, this is 8.7 foot-pounds or 105 inch-pounds. Now, you want to start in the center and work your way out. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I'm just going to continue on, work in the middle, and just go from side to side, eventually working your way out through the bolts. And that way you will make sure that they are evenly tightened. All right, all 14 are torqued down to 105 inch-pounds, and we are done with the oil pan. All right, guys, now that we have the bottom pan all torqued down to spec, Now we are ready to add the transmission fluid. As you can see, I have my long funnel here ready to accept some HCF-2. I have the plug out right here. Now I will have a link to this specific funnel in my description, so if you need to pick that up, I'll have that available for you. Now the regular, if you're just doing a drain and fill, the front wheel drive model, which is what this is, takes 3.9 quarts. If you have the all-wheel drive model, then it takes the 4.5 quarts. But we did more than a drain and fill. We did a 2 filter change and a complete drain. So I believe from what research I've done, this should be a little over 5 quarts. So I think what I'm going to do is, for now, I'm just going to put in about 4 quarts, and then we will go in the car and run it through the gears, and I'll show you what I mean by running through the gears here in just a moment. But for now, let's just go ahead and fill it up with 4 quarts of the HCF-2. So you may be asking, why don't I just go ahead and put in the full 5? Well, I surely don't want to overfill this transmission, and I know without the filter change it takes 3.9, so I think that 4 should be pretty adequate. So, and I'm not going to leave it at 4, so I need to show you how we properly check to make sure that the proper amount is actually in the transmission. Alright guys, so let me give you a quick rundown of why I only put 4 quarts in there for right now. We need to circulate the fluid so it can get in all the nooks and crannies and the new filters, and then once it is in those nooks and crannies and in the new filters, then it can provide us with an accurate fluid level. So we will use a check bolt to ultimately check that at the end, but first we need to get the fluid circulating, so we need to start the vehicle. Before we start the vehicle, I need to put back in the air box. That won't affect us from filling up the transmission fluid here. So we only removed that because we changed this filter right here. So I'm going to go ahead and put in that air box. As you know, it's just this clip. Just make sure you put it straight down on this grommet right here, and then of course the 2 fasteners, and then connect the harness. So I'm going to do that real quick, then we can start the vehicle and circulate the fluid. Okay, I got all the fasteners fastened down. Just gonna snap those back on, snap the harness back on. Our 2 fasteners are snug. This clamp is snug all the way. So now our air box is back in. Okay, now that we have everything buttoned up, we're going to get in the vehicle as it's still jacked up, and we are going to go ahead and start the vehicle. So at this point, we're not going to drive anywhere. In fact, it's on jack stands, so we're definitely not going anywhere. But just to let you guys know, the whole point of this is to just what I call run it through the gears. So what we're going to do is of course, foot on the brake, and we're going to just put it in reverse. And then we're going to keep it in each gear just a few seconds, maybe 3 to 5 seconds. And as I call it, we're just going to run it through the gears. We're just going to go all the way down and then all the way up. And what this is going to do is this is going to work the transmission, and it's going to get all that transmission fluid in all those other nooks and crannies and everything, so we can get a proper reading of how much transmission fluid is in the transmission. And then after we do this, we're going to turn off the car, and then we're going to go underneath the car, and we're going to open up that check bolt. So I'm going to finish running this through the gears, turn it off, and then I'll meet you underneath the vehicle. Okay guys, we are back underneath the car. Just give you some orientation. Here is the transmission drain bolt, and here is the 12mm check bolt. I'm going to loosen and take out that 12mm check bolt. So the point of this check bolt is this lets you know whenever you have the transmission all the way full, the fluid will actually leak, or it will come out of this check bolt hole here, and then that's whenever you can put in this check bolt and torque it to spec, because it's dripping. It's a little bit is coming out. A little bit is coming out. Not enough. That's not because it's full, because it's definitely not full, but it probably just had a little bit of air in there that pushed it out. just a little built up pressure. This has a crush washer on it as well. You want to go ahead and replace that crush washer, get you a new one. These are one-time use crush washers. So, and I'll give you the torque spec whenever we're ready to button this up. I'm going to go ahead and get my drain pan underneath here because transmission fluid will be leaking out. I have the fill plug out and I have my funnel. This fits perfectly between the air box and the air intake. Everything right here fits perfectly right in the fill hole. So here's what we're going to do. I am going to get a fresh quart of this transmission fluid and we are going to, actually, you know what? I think the easiest thing is get yourself somebody to help you pour this in. So I'm going to have one of my helpers pour this in here. And then while they are slowly pouring that into the transmission, I am going to be underneath the car down below, and I'll have my camera set up. Once the fluid starts coming out of the check bolt, that is whenever you know that you have a full transmission. Now, by the way, I did measure the car, and it is up on jack stands, but I did measure it, and it is level. My garage is at a slight incline, but I still jacked up the rear a little bit more than the front. And also, I actually have a level up here. Maybe a little hard to see on the camera, but I have a level, and my car, or the CRV, is level. You definitely want this level, or else you won't get an accurate reading. Oh, okay, you can stop. All right, guys, you can see it's dripping out, so I'm going to go ahead and put in this check bolt. We'll get it hand tight, and then we'll get our torque wrench and we'll torque this down to spec. All right, guys, now on this 12mm check bolt, we are going to go to 15 foot-pounds. There we go. All right. All right, guys, I took out the funnel and I put in the fill plug right there. So that's all wrapped up. And I believe that concludes this CVT transmission change and 2 filters change. I still need to put on the undercarriage tray, but I am also going to be doing an oil change, so I'm not going to do that just yet. But I just wanted to say I thank you guys for watching, and I appreciate it. If you got any value out of this video, if you learned anything, please give me a thumbs up. Y'all take care.